Good afternoon. This is Devin. I am doing a little bit of a tutorial on how to use WSV3. The version that I'm using is the professional version in beta. So this is the beta version for version 4.0. So there are a lot of different features on this version since it is the professional version. They're not seen in the core version. However, what's in the core version is fantastic for the price, but it is fairly limited on what it can do. So today I'm going to take you on a little tour of the various features of WSV3 professional version. So first things first, I went ahead and started the software before recording, just because I don't really care for the transition at the very beginning where the globe spins a little bit. It gets hung up every now and then. Don't panic if this happens to you. It's simply because the software is attempting to load a lot of various tiles on its first open run. But once you get here to the United States, you'll see that there's an integrated GIS system. If this is your first time opening it, this will not be here. You will not have state lines. You won't have county lines. All of that will have to be imported manually. The great thing is there's a tool for that that's built into the software, and we'll get to that in a few minutes. First, we'll just go over some of the products. The first main product up here in the top left is the National Radar. All you have to do is toggle that on. By default, that might already be on. This radar is pretty much your very, very basic radar. It's a stitched together mosaic of all the radar sites in the United States. It is very low quality, and it comes from a free data source, so every now and then that does tend to go down with high impact events such as severe weather, multi-day outbreaks. Right underneath where you've got your National Radar button is your precipitation typing. Precipitation typing uses an algorithm that's built into the software. It is completely based on the RAP model, the 0 hour RAP that basically categorizes snow, freezing rain, ice pellets, etc. You'll see that once I turn that on, there's a big banded area of snow that's detected up there, and that can be verified by switching on your METAR observations and selecting weather. But real quick, to get this going, if you want to animate it, you just simply go up here to the top right and click the play button. The loop loads fairly quickly for what it is, since it is a large file that comes through. However, you'll see that it loads pretty quickly. Right up here at the top, that's the amount of time that you can load your loops for. Right now, you're maxed out at about 7 or 8 hours, but the default is 3 hours, and 3 hours is pretty much all most people need. Simply because you don't need to look too far back. The old the old Weather Studio did that. It took quite some time to get things going. So, moving along to our next little section here, I'm going to pause this, and you can play with this slider all you want to. Ignore model forecast right there. We'll get to that soon. So, I'm going to turn this off. Next is our GOES satellite sectors. Right now, GOES East does not work. To prove it to you, I'll turn it on. It will not work, and that is because GOES East was replaced with GOES 16. GOES 16 uses a new file format instead of what it used to use, which were basically very large image files. It uses what's called NetCDF. NetCDF is the file type that's used for radar, raw radar data files, which WSV3 can decode. However, that decoder is not built for the satellite just yet. So what I'll do is switch that off, and I'll turn on GOES West. In a second, that's going to load. Boom, there it is. This is using the current Goes West satellite. It doesn't have the greatest resolution, but that will change once our satellites are fully replaced and once everything is up and running as far as the net CDF decoder goes. I'm just going to play this for you. Basically what this does is it takes the image files from the GOES data feed and it breaks it out into large tiles. The tiling helps to keep the CPU usage down. It does a pretty good job of that. As you can see, my system loaded up pretty quickly. Most low-end systems can load it up pretty fast. So don't fret if you have a low-end system with 4 gigs of RAM. You're fine. Even if you have a Pentium processor, you're good. So I'm going to turn off GOES satellite. We also got the Alaska sectors, Puerto Rico, and Hawaii. If you need those for any reason at all. Usually you'll need Puerto Rico for the tropical weather. So next is our surface observations. You've got temperature, which is taking a second to load. You got your temperature observations. If you hover over each one, you get a readout of what the METAR is saying. You can also further that by looking at dew points, wind barbs, which is pretty great. You can look at your altimeter pressure. Not too many people do anymore, but if you'd like to, you can. You can look at your wind gusts that are being reported, your relative humidity percentages, your heat index, the wind chill, which is pretty cold up north, and weather that's being observed. There are tons of different icons. You can actually select what kinds of icons you want to use. You just have to load in your own icon sheet. There are plenty of those on the WSV3 forums. If you go into the customizations area, you will see that. And they're pretty good. There's a lot of good creators out there for this kind of stuff. So when we first loaded things up, we saw that the national radar was depicting snow in some areas. And you can see that that is being verified by METAR observations. However, this right here is freezing rain, heavy freezing rain. That's probably not happening just because if you look around, there isn't much going on there. Plus, the METARs that are near it are reporting rain anyway, and very light rain. So I'm going to go ahead and turn off the surface observations. Under the More tab there, you can select your color palettes for various observation types. You can even change the spacing from dense to sparse. I like to keep it on the dense side. That way I get a good sampling of everything that's there. You can even change the font sizes to be large if you're having trouble seeing. Right now there are no severe weather watches or warnings. However, I do have severe turned off for some reason. Anyway, if you want to change your watch styles, you can. You just click on the box that says watch. And that's pretty much it. You can see right here styles. All you have to do is click on it. Now, these are new features here, the style editors. When you click on one of these and it brings up a style editor for you, you can play around with the display mode some. It will change some aspects of it, but for the most part I like to keep it on what the default is, in this case an outline polygon. However, you can do a filled polygon and it'll get rid of the outline. If you want to change any of that, you can change the line style by clicking on edit. There's tons of different zoom levels, but in my case I've deleted all of them because I want this to be there for all zooms. It's really cool. The style editor is new. It's very easy to use. Just go on, play with it. You really can't hurt anything. Just back up your settings files, which are located in your app data folder under your users. You can Instead of seeing a county watch box, you can see an aviation watch box, which are the old ones. And let's see. Sorry, I'm trying to collect my thoughts here. Anyway, nobody really uses that anymore. You can see what your current watches are by clicking watch list. The watch list currently shows nothing, but if there were any watches here, you could highlight and click on them and click show full text to see what the text is on it from the Storm Prediction Center, which is pretty cool. You can do the same for warnings. The warnings it also has a fairly new behavior to it across versions. You can see your warning list, which pops up down here again. You can even zoom to your warnings. You can edit your warning styles, which is really cool. These are new features here. So there's show tracking objects. When you have show tracking objects turned on, I'll show you what that does. I'll turn on my national radar. Just waiting for it to load. There we go. So what happens is when there are storms like these here around, if there is any type of warning or anything like that, what happens is you'll get a tracking object. A tracking object is essentially an arrow that points in the direction the storm is going. And if you click on it, you can see the projected path of it that the software thinks it's going in, which is really cool. You can also, so you can turn that on and off. You can change the click behavior of a warning outline. So if you want to see full text, you just right click. If you want to just see an info box, you left click. Then there's also map captions. In my opinion, the map captions make things a little overcrowded, but what it does is when it's on, if a warning pops up, the map caption will pop up over it saying what type of warning it is, what kind of impact it has, and why the warning's been issued. So if it's due to hail or if it's due to wind, it'll show you those kinds of things. So I'm going to turn the national radar back off again. So now we get into the good stuff, surface analysis. So you've got all these different options here. I try to leave everything off unless I need it on. You have your MSLP. I changed my contours to be black, and you can do that by opening up this sidebar here, going into the contour layer, and changing the color. I just wanted to make mine black. Some people do white for theirs. Some people just keep it the default color. All in all, it's the same thing. It looks good no matter what. Then new to this is the 10-meter winds. 10-meter winds do exist in older versions. However, right now they're broken in those older versions. The beta versions are the only ones that have working 10-meter winds. The 10-meter winds will show you arrows that are color-coded for wind strength, and it'll show you the direction in which the wind is blowing. I'm going to turn that off because it's kind of taking up resources. You got your 2-meter temperature fill, which will take a second to load because it is a pretty big file. And while we wait for that to load, I'll load up the fronts and the centers here. Now the fronts are very basic. They're just line images. So the reason why there are no arrows for your traditional cold front or semicircles for your traditional warm fronts is because the software doesn't really have a way to resize those and resample them. So what will happen is you'll end up having one size for those little pieces, the arrows and the semicircles. When you zoom in and out, it's going to look really funky. So right now, the 2-meter temperature doesn't want to come on. That's probably due to my internet connection, or it could be because my computer is processing a lot of resources because I am using a screen recorder to record everything. So next on the list, you have your explore options, which only allows you to pan and zoom. You can't do anything else. If you try to click on warnings, you couldn't click on them. Nothing will come up. If you choose interact, then everything on the map is clickable. You can click warnings, you can click watches, you can click the tracking objects. And if you want to probe something, I'll turn on the radar again. You just click on probe. By default, there's crosshairs. I have mine turned off because I don't like them. But if you just start hovering over, you'll see your decibels for your rainfall. But you can probe pretty much anything you want. You can also, if you click, it'll paste those down for you, which is pretty nice. And if you click probe again or you click interact, it'll wipe those all off. You can also do image capturing. If you click this button, fine, that's great. There's a shortcut though, it is Control S. Control S will automatically save the image for you. There's also video capturing. I don't really like the video capturing on this software, but there are a lot of people who use them. You can change your map styles by clicking on map style, and you can even set a new map style if you like. But if you click on any of these, well, if you double click on any of them, it will apply them to the map, which is really, really cool. But the ones that are on here, I don't care for too much. I have mine set to the way I like it. You can also set the modes for how your map is. Light mode will be very light on resources. Balanced is a good in between, and graphics is if you've got really good graphics settings, it will take up a lot of resources, but you'll have a really clean looking map. So next we'll go over to the, so this was all the basic layers tab. We'll go over to the NextRad Pro tab. NextRad Pro is really cool because even though it is part of WSV3 Core, the only part that's in it is your level 3 viewer, which is fine and all, but I don't really like using just level 3 data. But I'll load some up just so you can see what that looks like. So you'll just hit on. And what I did was I clicked show sites here. That way I can just click on a site. And I'm going to switch to Oklahoma City because there's some storms there. And the level 3 radar pops up pretty quickly. And that's because they're very lightweight files. If you just click on the animate button like I just did, it'll load in 12 frames of data. Now the frames process and move very quickly, so if you want to change it to where the frames move a little bit more slowly on animation, you can. You just have to go into the settings and do that. Just keep in mind that those settings are in milliseconds and not steps. So just keep that in mind. You can click through your velocity and your hydrometeor classification if you're into that. I don't necessarily like to use it, even though it is a cool dual polarization product. It's really just an overall guesstimate of what's falling. So now I'm going to switch this over to level 2 data. Level 2 data is really cool. It's very high resolution. It does not have hydrometeor classification because that is a level 3 dual polarization product. So I switch over to level 2. You're going to see that it's going to take it a minute to load, and there it is. Now you can definitely tell the difference between level 3 and level 2. I'll show you real quick. So this is level 2 data here. It's very crisp, very nice and high resolution, and this is the level 3 data. You can definitely see the difference. Level 3 data is much lower resolution. So I'm going to switch back to the level 2. And notice there is a live sweep that you can turn on and off. This live sweep is actually live. It's not a gimmick. This is where the radar dish inside the radome is currently pointing, which is really cool. And the degrees, or the direction it's facing, is this number here on the left in degrees. And then the number on the right is your tilt angle. So it just finished the 1.8 degree tilt. It's going to the 2.4 degree tilt now. I'm going to turn that off because I don't like that beam. You can also activate live scan. Live scan's a really cool feature. By default, it's got a very thick line that flashes, and it has times on it when it goes through. It might take a few minutes for the live scan feature to actually show up on here, but you'll definitely notice it when it happens. You'll see, I have mine set to be an invisible line, so you'll suddenly see the radar shift and then update. And that's what the live scan is doing. The live scan imports and pipes in chunks of radial data as it comes in and as it's being processed, which is really neat. So say I went up to the 6.4 degree tilt, I'd probably see the live sweep happening. In fact, let's see if it is. Yep, you can see it going around very quickly. And up here it says live scan active. And you see that? It just did a live scan, which is really cool. So there's some storms there, but it's not enough. There shouldn't be enough data to activate what's called the live composite. Live composite's really cool. However, a lot of times the radar doesn't satisfy the requirements for it. If I click it now, it's probably going to tell me that. Yeah. So the conditions there don't satisfy the threshold. That threshold is that there has to be widely scattered rainfall within the radar's area, and all of your tilts have to be full. The reason for this is because the live composite is exactly that. It's a composite. The composite loads and updates as new data comes in. As that new data comes in, it goes from the 0.5 degree tilt, and it basically keeps stacking the tilts on top of each other to create a seemingly live radar that's constantly moving. In this radar control section right here, this panel, you can turn on storm cell tracking mode, which is really cool. What that does is it turns on your storm attributes, and you can click on everything. What's really cool is that when you click on it, it gives you a path that is forecast to move. It gives you times here on the side, along with towns and cities of where that's going to impact. It's a really neat feature. It tells you storm direction, how fast the storm's moving. This is all calculated based on what the radar is telling us. You can even hover over and it'll tell you, hey, you've got 20 minutes and 8 seconds, and it'll just count down from there to the impact. Turn that off, you just hit storm cell tracking mode again. I'm going to turn off all the tracks and everything. And then we have the storm cell tracking system here. This is a manual tracking tool. Well, this one isn't, but it will color code your storms and everything so that you can see or focus on which storms are more interesting to you. You can set filters for that and everything. It's really cool. There are more features here. It's pretty crazy. So you can toggle your map legend on and off. You can do what's called level 2 split cut scans, which if I turn it on, it'll give me this warning. Split cut scans are neat, to say the least. They're really great with mesoscale convective systems and severe weather and rapidly developing severe weather, as long as it's close to the radar. Because what these split cut scans do is after the initial reflectivity scan is done, what your radar does is it scans, it starts scanning your velocity sectors. In the middle of it scanning your velocity sector, it kicks back in and scans for reflectivity because that's just what the radar does. I'm not a radar technician, even though that would be really cool to do someday. It's just not my thing. But that's the best explanation I can give you as to why it does that. And then it just inserts that data into the radar stream. It's really cool. Like I said, I like it for rapidly developing severe weather. Gives you a good picture of what's going on, how fast everything's happening. Then there's the NexRad Pro Veritilt. If you look closely, there is a shadow being cast by the radar data. I like that because it looks more showy, I guess you could say. But you can do flat surface projected, which removes that shadowed 3D tilt. This is what you see in the Gibson Ridge products. You don't see any shadowed tilts or anything like that. You could select 3D tilts, which pretty much does nothing for me, and then the shadowed tilts would give you the shadow. You can change live scan features there as well, but I'm going to go ahead and leave that out. There are a number of level 2 derived products that are included here that are not included in other softwares. Two of them are wind shear and gate-to-gate shear. And then the third one is your downdraft gust potential. Downdraft gust potential is still fairly experimental, and it's derived from a lot of different parameters, but it actually gives a pretty good estimate of what's going on. So this specific cell here has a gust potential in its downdraft of about 53 miles per hour. If that downdraft were to occur, a severe thunderstorm warning would probably be issued because that pops over the threshold for a severe thunderstorm warning. It's a really cool feature, and it's based on some research by a few scientists out there who have a really good idea of what they're talking about. Then there's also the manual tracking here. You can draw manual track by clicking on Draw Manual Storm Track. And if you just click once and pull, you can make a cone. But if you click, hold, and drag, you can make a line segment there. And that's good for typically lines of thunderstorms and tracking them. So I'm going to turn off the radar data there, and we're going to move on to the MRMS radar suite. Stands for multi-radar, multi-sensor. This was completely experimental. It still is, in a very broad sense, experimental. What MRMS does is it basically gives you a better version of the national picture. And you can see that in base. You can see a base reflectivity shot. It is very slow to load, so I'm not going to load them. They are more higher resolution images than your typical national radar. When you go to load the loop, though, it does take a good minute or two to load everything completely. It will only load 12 frames of data, and that is because you can't exceed that. It's set that way by default in the program. You can't change it, because what will happen is load times will increase a lot, and then a lot of resources will get taken up, and the software will probably crash from too much loading. Here's a real-time lightning panel here. That was experimental for the development team of the software. Basically what it did was it took this little lightning section, and it took lightning density and overlaid an icon sheet of lightning bolts over it, and they would flash. It was really cool. You could change the interval in minutes, 1, 15, 5, and 30, just like the graphical product here. It doesn't work anymore, and it's probably going to be going away within the next few updates. The newest tab for us is the model tab that's built in. Well, it's not the newest, but it is very new because what's great is you can do loops now, and loops are really cool. They load very quickly now, which is pretty awesome. And just to show you, I will load up a loop right now. So what it does is it downloads the product that you're looking for, and I might be on one of those intermittent runs. Yeah, the HER's kind of weird. It doesn't always produce a p-typed reflectivity model data field. That happens on certain runs. The 19Z run does not generate one, but the 20Z run does. So to run a loop, you just click loop. Don't mind the start. I'm just going to set the end time to 6 a.m. tomorrow, and I'll just click on load loop. You can load up to 3 different fields of products. You can load your vector fields and contour fields as well. But the loop loads very quickly. Now, that's scary looking. That'll probably change a lot during the next several hours. But the loop loaded very, very quickly. I mean, in under a minute at least, which is great. However, I do have a system that's a little bit beefier than some, so it probably loaded faster because of that. But everything's fairly lightweight as far as the data downloading on this, so it does actually run very smoothly and quickly. You can stop these transitions, and you can scroll around like this. You can even, once you click on this little dot here, you can use the arrow keys on your keyboard to slide through. Now, I'm sure you noticed, or maybe you didn't, when I clicked loop and then load loop, this changed. It went from main timeline to model forecast. That's because the models are on a separate animation timeline. They can't be animated at the same time as real data. So, to get around that problem, a separate timeline was added. That's the model forecast timeline. To switch back to the main timeline, you just click on main timeline. And to clear your model data, you just click on none for the layer, and it goes away. Then you got your meso-analysis products. Meso-analysis products are a little bit limited. They're not the greatest amount of products out there. The Storm Prediction Center has a great meso-analysis tool with a lot more on it. So you've got all your different products. This one that's here is WindGust. You've got your surface visibility as well. This is the default color scheme. I hate it, but I don't use it enough to need to change it. Then you have your surface cape, your surface inhibition, your mu cape, and your mu sen, your storm relative helicity, your lifted index, your 850 heights. I mean, everything's in there. So your absolute vorticity. EHI is in there, which was something that a lot of people fought to get in there. But there's also your STP, which is your significant tornado parameter, and your SCP, which is your supercell composite. These features are great when when they work. STP and SCP are not an exact science by any means. They are great during certain situations. However, they don't always verify. So just be careful when using that. Then you got your forecast tab. Don't think your forecast tab is tied to your model tab, because it isn't. These forecasts come from the Weather Prediction Center, or WPC. You can see your excessive rainfall outlook with it. You cannot do a time range on the ERO, because the ERO is only for 1 day at a time. So you can switch to day 2 and day 3 on it, but you cannot do days 1 through 2. You notice how that didn't change when I did that. You also notice that this is now grayed out and I can't click on it. So I'm going to turn that off. You can also see your QPF. Now the QPF you can play with all day and change your time ranges and everything on that. Looking like a pretty significant little event getting ready to happen out there. You can also look at your winter accumulation probabilities. These probabilities can be changed. right here on the side. Right now it's showing snow in the 4-inch range, but you can look at 8 inches, which isn't much except for your higher elevations down here. You can change it to a foot if you want to, which is not anywhere, or you can look at ice, which is something that can be pretty useful. Your NDFD tab is your National Digital Forecast Database. I don't use it. I don't really like it. It's a little clunky in my opinion, so I'm going to skip past that. If you're a National Weather Service and Storm Prediction Center tab, you can turn on your advisories by default. These are all checked by default, which isn't that great of a thing to do in my opinion, but whatever, it is what it is. The National Weather Service All Advisories layer is revamped. It loads asynchronously of the system, so there are no more lockups like there used to be. People used to think that the system was crashing because of it. It wasn't. It was just locking up because it was loading a lot of data. You can change all of this manually. You can add different types of warnings. If you want to add a cupcake warning, you could. Nothing would ever show up though. And boom, there they are. These are all my winter ones just because it's the winter time right now, so I have them on. You can also turn on your convective outlooks. You can edit the convective outlook styles manually. Right over here, if you hit adjust categorical styles or probabilistic styles, you even read the text product. Right now, this one's not working. You can change your outlooks from day 2, day 3. You could go all the way to day 8. In fact, I think there's a day 4, day 5 one right now. Maybe there's a day 6, which doesn't happen too often. I'll have to keep an eye on that because that's in my backyard. You can also turn on your mesoscale discussions. They do work, although they don't show up all the time. Right now, it seems like the National Weather Service isn't issuing a whole lot of those. You can read the text products for them. However, they're a little hit or miss, and I don't really care for them. You can turn on your local storm reports as well, and you can change what type of reports are being sent. If you hover over them, text boxes are pretty big, but it tells you what the report is for exactly, which is really neat. And we'll head over to the tropical tab. The tropical tab is pretty new. There's nothing out there right now, but you can turn on your active systems. You can show your invest systems, best track, official forecast. Everything can be edited. Everything can be customized. It's awesome. The tropical tab has had its issues this past tropical season. However, there have been a lot of complaints with it. And the main issue is that it uses data from ATCF. ATCF data can be very outdated by several hours. So it's being worked on to pull from the National Hurricane Center's intermittent advisories because what happens is those intermediate advisories update paths, they update strengths, they update where the storm's at. And if you're not seeing that, you're suddenly going to see the best track shift because the best track gets updated for some reason before anything else. You see the best track shift, and then all of a sudden your data is thrown off and you're wondering what the heck is going on. So we'll skip past that. You've got your marine layers tab, which will show you buoy observations, which is really cool. I'm waiting for mine to come on. They show sustained winds, and anywhere that there is a buoy with the NDBC, you will see data for it. You can see winds, wind gusts, you can see the water temperature. If you see an anomaly like this 48, it's probably a good indication that that buoy is not reporting correctly. You can look at your wave heights, your wave periods. It's really cool. There's also ship observations. Any ships that are out there reporting their observations will come to this. They don't pop up a whole lot, but they are there. Right here at the very bottom left, there's large font show sites. We can all guess what large font does. If you click show sites, it'll show you all of the currently active buoy sites. You can click on them. It'll load the data. It'll tell you what it's for or what unit it's on. And this one is only reporting oceanographic data, which is pretty cool. You can slide through your times. If you slide to the right, that's in the past. Left is most recent. And right now, if it goes east for the full disk, does not work because of the issue stated earlier. However, it does give you a really good view out into the tropical Atlantic. So it's very useful during tropical weather season, and that'll be fixed once the current goes east issue is fixed. Head over into the winter tab. The winter tab's pretty nice. It gives you your winter accumulations that are being forecast. If I click on snow, snow's already highlighted there. It'll show me a forecast for it. Right now, the probability percentile is set to 50th, which is your expected amount. And what you can do is probe that data. And I mean, the snow accumulation forecast is looking at 4, 5, 6 inches in those areas there. And you can change your accumulation interval to be 72 hours, 48, and 24 hours. That was a 72-hour forecast. This is a 24-hour forecast. You can change the transparency of it with this slider. You can change the color palette for it if you like. Probably shouldn't, but if you've got a better one, definitely use it. You can turn the timestamp off and on. You can show the map legend, which there isn't one for this right now. And you can change this to ice if you really want to. The ice accumulations don't always show, but in this case it looks like they are, which 6 inches of ice sounds pretty bad. I don't think that's going to happen, but if it does, oops. And then there's a miscellaneous tab here. The miscellaneous tab has a few features in it that the creators didn't know where to put. And a lot of it, some of it's experimental, some of it isn't. Right here, the left is a difference. It shows you your differences in the past, however many hours that you select of these 3 different products. You've got a temperature difference over the last 24, dew point, and MSLP. I like to look at MSLP differences and temperature differences. If you click on it, the default palette is red against blue. Obviously, it's freezing cold where it's blue, and it's hotter where it's reddish orange. MSLP differences, where it's blue, you've got higher pressure. Where it's red, you've got lower pressure over the last 24 hours. You can look at your reported earthquakes from the USGS, which is pretty cool. And I believe those are all over the world. So you can go way over here into the Middle East and take a look if you like. If you do that, your map's going to freak out a little bit, and your terrain settings are going to look the way they look on mine right now. You can also look at your fire detections for wildfires. These aren't always updated. I don't think they're always 100% accurate. They are satellite-based observations. This one's from MODIS. This other one's from VIIRS, from the I band. That's what's used to detect wildfires on that satellite specifically. You can also look at river gauge observations here. You can look at current observations, or you can look at your river forecasts, which is pretty neat on here. I'm going to switch that back to current. And then you can also load up your fire weather outlook from the Storm Prediction Center. You can read the outlook text, which is really cool right there. You can change the style of it if you like. You can change what days you're looking at. Turn that off. Now, if you go here, the top left, it's all kinds of stuff. You could change all your GIS settings, map styles. You can manage your shape files, your roads. There's a lot going on there. Under advanced here, you can load up your FPS counter, see how well your computer's handling everything. If your shaders aren't working correctly, you can recompile them. You can show or not show the exceptions that pop up when something messes up. I have mine turned off because the program still runs. I just don't want to have to keep clicking ignore, or I don't want to keep seeing them. If you add a new color palette into your color palettes directory while the software is running, all you have to do is click refresh color palettes from directory and it will populate in there for you. Telestration feature is pretty cool. If you want to start the paintbrush, you just have to hit Control T, which I'll do right now, and then you can draw all you want. It's clear, you hit space, and it's turned off, you hit Control T again. There's also text annotations, which is pretty cool. You can pretty much put whatever you want on the map, and I'm going to put hello right there. You can edit the font, the text appearance. I'm going to delete it. You can have as many annotations as you want on the map. You've got a place file manager, which does work now. It works much better than it used to. Chaser tools, this is just if you want to connect a GPS receiver or if you want to connect an anemometer. Not too many people have done either one of those. You can set your FTP uploading if you want to upload any of this to a website via FTP. You can set your encryption, username, password. You can test your connection, and you can set your interval in minutes, which is pretty cool. There's also a link to the product website. You can make this software check for updates, which is pretty great. You can see all the acknowledgments here. You can go to the form or the website. And if you go to your program settings, which is here, or you can hit Control O, you can see all of your configuration settings. Mine are all crazy. Most of it's default. I don't know what this frame buffer effect is. I've never played with it. I have the star field turned off because it uses a little bit more resources than I like. The sidebar right here I've turned off, but that's what shows up on the side here. You can show lat long cursor text, change the background color of your map. There's also, if you want to add a logo, you can. Top left, top right, bottom, wherever you want. You can turn a timestamp on or off. You can change how the timestamp looks. You can set it to wherever you want it to go. You could change your local times. You could change it to local time zone UTC. Or if you don't want it to even show a time zone, you don't have to. The GIS system stuff is right here. If you click on shapefile layers, it'll show you everything that's loaded currently. This GIS complements thing right here is your what you're going to load up to start so that you can get your state lines and your county lines and everything. That's going to be right here where it says download and install high-res GIS complement. That'll also download your main roads. You can also look at your video settings if you're into that, your data and downloading settings. We pull our level 2 data from the Amazon Web Services servers. You can, if you want, choose to make that your source for live data. However, it does get kind of slow sometimes, so I don't recommend it. But if your data is really slow on the default server settings, you can change it. You just have to turn off your radar data before you do that. And this is also your frames for everything. You got loop speeds, It's all in milliseconds, so play with it at your own risk of messing that up completely, because I don't really know exactly how long a millisecond lasts, especially with frames, so I don't mess with it myself. You have a little model data tab on here. This is new. I haven't played with it myself too much, but you can change your loop speed if you like. Background and terrain settings is where you change your tile density to be high resolution or high performance. You can show if you want terrain only, imagery only, or terrain and imagery. I have both turned on. Terrain uses a lot less resources by itself, though. You change your terrain appearance by clicking on terrain appearance. Mine looks like it's freezing up the whole thing, and there it is. You can change everything you want on it. The hypsometric tinting, this is where you'll change your terrain palette if you don't like the one you have currently. Then you've got your globe lighting. What you'll see is the custom options, what's going to be turned on by default. I just change it to center because I like that. You got views and camera. I don't know what any of this does, so I don't mess with it. You have miscellaneous options. You could change the pen color of your illustration pen. You could change the width of it if you like. This is where I turned off my crosshair for my probe mode. You can also change some velocity stuff here. Animated color palettes are something that's specific to WSV3. If you'll notice, by default, they are turned on. If you zoom in very closely to a storm, you'll see that the higher DBZ values are flashing. If you don't want those to be flashing, you can just come in here and click Disable Animated Color Palettes, hit Apply, and it'll stop. And lastly, you have your city labels. You can change how they look. You can change if they're all caps, all lowercase, however you want them. You can make them that way. I have them set to sparse spacing for some reason. I must have changed that recently. You can show or not show your city labels if you want. You can edit the entire database. You just have to come up here at the top and click Load Database. You can add cities. You can delete cities. You can make it to where only the cities that you select show up, which is really cool. This right here, this not responding thing, isn't something that normally happens. It's happening because I'm using a screen recording software. So that's why that's happening to me right now. If I leave it alone for a couple of minutes, it'll more than likely be back to normal. It's just because it's doing a lot of different things at one time. So I'm going to end it here. Feel free to use this as a starting guide for everything. Look, see, there it is. And you can go through all of it like that. It's really cool. So, like I said, just use this as a starting guide, a basic starting guide. And play with things, see how you like them. It's really fun software to use. It's very professional. I enjoy using it a lot. So yeah, if anyone's got any questions, just feel free to be asking.